is Landon Beach, and the title of my book is The Sale, and I'm originally from Michigan, but I live in Florida now.
Great. I'm going to hit you right off with a toughie. Your book, the first chapter of The Sale, has so much action in it. I mean, it ends up with, you have shipwreck, there's a storm, there's airplane trouble, there's guys wondering what the heck they're really doing, why are they really doing what they're doing. Was it important to you to start the book with a big punch in the face like that?
Well, the books that I write are set in the Great Lakes, and so I'm writing a 5-book saga, and each book is set on a different Great Lake. So this book, The Sale, is set on Lake Superior, and in Michigan, the Griffin is the holy grail of Great Lake shipwrecks. It's never been found. But up in Lake Superior, we have our most famous shipwreck, and that's the Edmund Fitzgerald. And so even though it occupies only a little bit of the book, I really wanted to get a piece of Michigan history in there and being respectful about what happened in the major tragedy that it was. Usually when I talk about Lake Superior with anyone, one of the first things that comes up is the Edmund Fitzgerald. And so I wanted to be able to historically bring in those events from November 1975 and yet have it be a segue into the rest of the book and wonder, what were these guys that are flying in the float plane carrying? Why is it so dangerous? Why is it so secretive? And so I did want that to kind of jumpstart the book.
It actually came off like a trailer almost, like you would see this at the beginning of this adventure. And I think much of what you write is visual. Do you have a process for doing that you pictured in the head? Or how do you get such great descriptive scenes in action?
Well, I think some of it comes from my love of film, and my master's degree is actually in screenwriting. And so when you write for the screen, it's all about what you see on the screen and visuals, and I think that's really informed my writing when I'm trying to write novels. Can I paint the picture, the smells, the feel of being right there while the action is taking place? And so I think that that's where a lot of that comes from.
Speaking of process, because there's a little bit of process in that.
Yeah.
Do you, at least for novel, well, first off, is novel writing very similar to screenwriting? Are there really big differences that you see?
There's a lot of big differences in the format and how you write them and the tense that you use. But in terms of a 3-act structure, it usually follows the same pattern where you've got a beginning, a middle, and an end, a climax, and a resolution. And so that isn't really that different. The part of a screenplay that is the most difficult to write is usually the middle. And I think in novels, I think that can be true as well. And so when I think of creating a novel, what I usually do is I look at characters first, and I spend a couple of weeks trying to get to know the characters, figure out what all of their voices will be, their wants, their needs, their vulnerabilities. And then once I think I've got them figured out, then I go right into looking at research, and I read about everything that I can get my hands on for the particular book that I'm writing, whether it be location or history that I'm going to weave in. And once I have a good sense of that, then I do a little bit of plotting. And what's worked for me for my books is I have a good idea where we're going to start to get the reader invested for the adventure. And then I always outline the climax, because that's the main experience that you want to deliver to your readers and the ride that you want to take them on. And so what that does, though, is it always gives me a point to aim for when I'm writing. But in between the beginning and the climax, it gives me a lot of leeway to be creative, so I can let some of the plot develop organically, maybe get an idea and go with it for a while, but as long as I know where I'm heading, I can always come back to that. And then other parts of the plot will be a little bit more detailed, a little bit more outlined. So that's mainly how I work with structuring my books.
So I'm always interested in, do you remember the moment when you realized that, oh, wait, I could be a writer? That's a thing people do, and I would like that.
Absolutely. And so I wrote a short story when I was in 4th grade, and my parents kept it. And I knew from that point on that I really like storytelling and entertaining. But the moment that you're referring to came in 2003, and I was thinking about a novel and I wanted to try it, and I got right to the end, and I remember closing the door that morning into the bedroom of our house that I was working, and I wrote 100 pages in one day and finished the book. And looking back now, 16 years later, that first novel was a 400-page disaster, but I will always be grateful for what it ignited in me. And the main thing that really drove me was I wanted to see if I could do it. And now I'm writing my fourth novel, and I've written 3 screenplays, but each one is so difficult to do, and there's just a lot of respect and a decade and a half of failure and some accomplishments just to really hone my craft and to get better at it. But it started probably in 2003 when I tried the first novel and actually got through it.
The idea of adventure writing and entering this competition particularly.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think a lot of authors and certainly the judges sometimes think the books are going to be somewhat devoid of introspection, yet in the sale, that's not the case. I don't want to ruin anything for the people who haven't read it, but there's a piece of personal concern. It's probably the best way I can say it.
Sure.
So, how do you work in something like that is a very serious, concerning subject, yet surrounded with basically a lot of thrilling fun and excitement and adventure?
So what I wanted to do with the sale, I actually started the book in 2011, and I got maybe a quarter or a third of the way in, and I got stuck. And that sometimes happens with creative works, and you put them aside, and maybe you come back to them, maybe you don't. But then a few years ago, I had a health scare where I thought I was at the end of my life, and thankfully it was life-threatening, non-life-threatening symptoms masquerading as something really serious. But in those few moments, I thought with my 2 daughters that I had so much to pass on and all the things that I was going to miss. And it was at that point that I realized that's what the sale really needed, was the relationship between Robin and his son. And I've always wanted to write a father and son book, and I thought about the things that he might want to pass down to Trist, as he may be facing the end or some challenges and on kind of borrowed time. And so that life experience I was able to bring in to the book, and those journal entries really were born of my own experience and what had happened. So that is how it evolved. It wasn't planned, but I didn't know if I was ever going to come back to the sale. But looking back now, I think it made it the novel that it is.
Is that a tool that you might use in future novels about looking for that same nugget of truth or concern or whatever that might be, and saying, yeah, that's something that I'm going to use again?
Yeah, I'm curious about a lot of things in life, and life can be frustrating and it can be wonderful. And I think exploring some aspect of that really drives the characters. And I think that's where it comes in, is with character motivations. What do they want in life, but what do they really need in life? Where are they vulnerable, and what do they learn? What's their arc? How do they change over 300 or 400 pages that makes it such a compelling journey? Because we all know in life it's really difficult to change, and I think that's why we're drawn to fiction, because when we see characters change, it's something that not a lot of us are able to do. And so I always think that that's a rewarding part of the journey writing, is seeing, can you make that happen, and not have it be by the numbers, but really something that evolves in a character and the relationship throughout. And I think it certainly happened with Robin from the beginning until the end, and what happened. So yes, I do agree with that.
Yeah, it's a very touching novel on a lot of levels. It's action scary, it's personally scary, it's uncomfortable to read parts of it, not because it's poor writing,
right,
because it's subject material. Let me ask you, change gears here a little bit. You're sitting at home, you enter this competition, you get the first email that says you made the top 10.
Right.
And you're like, okay, that's probably pretty cool. Then you get the second email that says you're in the top 3. How did that make you feel? I know that's a trite, overused question to ask, but how did it make you feel when you're like, here, I'm marching down, I made the next cut? How did you feel?
It was fantastic. It's so hard to write a book, and having entered this contest before and getting the feedback from last year and the other past winners and people who entered this year's contest, and to make the final 3, it was just a fantastic opportunity to come here to Phoenix and meet the other writers, because writing is so solitary. And right now I've got a wife and 2 small children and a little puppy, a golden retriever, and so life is all about balance, and there isn't a lot of time outside of my own personal writing, which I'm really grateful to my family that have let me make it a priority, but to meet other writers and to get into writing groups and to talk. So when I found out that I made the finals, I was really excited to come out here and just talk to other authors and writers and see how they go about the process, and I've learned a ton from them in the last couple days. So it felt great, and it's just been a wonderful experience from the first moment until we are right now.
Any more?
No, you got one?
No, I'm just going to say we're getting close here.
Okay, let me ask one more. Is there a question that we didn't ask you? A question that we didn't ask you that you wish that we would?
Yeah. What's next for me?
Yeah, you know what? Hey, I was just thinking, Landon, what's next for you?
So right now I have The Wreck, which is a sea adventure that takes place on Lake Huron, and The Sail is a sea adventure that takes place on Lake Superior. And I just had my 3rd book come out, The Cabin, which is an espionage thriller, which takes place in Rochester, New York, on Lake Ontario. And I'm getting through the 4th book in the Great Lakes Saga, which will take place on Lake Erie, and that's called The Hike. And I think that that should be out in another 6 months or so. And that's a private investigator mystery novel. And then the last book, for the last Great Lake, I'll come home to Lake Michigan, and that's tentatively titled The Bay, and that'll be another sea adventure. In 3 days from now, Scott Brick is going to be recording the audiobook versions of The Wreck, and then in a couple weeks after that, he's going to be performing The Sail. And then I think probably 2 or 3 months from now, he'll do The Cabin. So within about 3 months, I'll have all 3 of my current books available on Kindle and paperback and audiobook. So I'm really excited to see where that goes, and then future books as well. Beyond that, I would love to see my screenplays get a shot at being made into feature-length films. I think they're timely and they're fun, and I think they'd make great films. And then beyond that, I have a traditional series character in mind, and so I might explore that, and then probably 2 or 3 standalones that I've already kind of mapped out. So ready for the journey and excited to get to work.
You seem to be really busy. What are you doing and sitting in a room here talking to us? That's work.
Because you made me.
That's fine. That's how we do. I think we're good.
All right.